Welcome, everybody. It's the 4th of May, and this is our secure front-end chapter meeting. You've got a first point, Fernando.
Sure. So I'll just say that I'll just surface this at a very high, not super technical level, because I'm going to be going through this tomorrow anyway in the MR widget extension working group in detail. But I did want to call out at the front end chapter level that essentially what's going on with the MR widget extension work is that anyone who's working on a secure stage widget, we may be blocked on rolling this out, because what happens is essentially there's this weird in-between state of weird in-between state where a 204 happens when a pipeline is running, and right after pipeline completes, and there's some lag of like parsing the report. So we get that 204 no content. Until we solve that, essentially what will happen is in some edge cases, when you create a brand new MR, the widget will fail. So if you create a brand new and you could test this to verify, but if you have worked on an MR widget extension already, go back, rerun the pipeline and load the page while the pipeline is running and see what happens. And most likely you will get like that exception, that red error fail state. You will also see that after pipeline completes, but on refreshing the page, sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. And the reason for that is there's caching. So what we do is it looks like the parsed report artifact is cached. I don't know for how long, but if you wait long enough and refresh the MR, like let's say a couple hours down in the day, you'll see that 204 pop up again, even on a completed pipeline. And then when you refresh it and you keep refreshing the page, you don't see it anymore. So that's why it was really like a weird bug to track. If you click into the issues, again, I'll be reviewing these in detail tomorrow at the MR widget extension meeting, just because I'm limited on time today. But I'm going to share my screen real briefly. So there are two issues opened here. And at a high level, it's this one. And I've called out here, it's specific to group secure so far. I can't confirm for the other groups, but if you created an MR widget extension for license scanning, container scanning, dependency, DAS, metrics, coverage fuzzing, API fuzzing, or the security widget, you may be impacted. And the technical details are here. The way you would know if it's affected is by looking at this is the more technical discussion, so this was a discovery process, is this controller. So all of these analyzer endpoints call report response, and this is the logic. So basically, if the pipeline is currently active, show a no content, which is a 204 status code. If it's parsing, show a status 204 code. The second issue is only impacts you if we use two endpoints, right? So we have the collapse and full data version. Now for the widgets, assuming we fix the 204 problem in the first issue and handle that gracefully, then what happens is we have enable polling only works for the collapse state endpoint, not for the expanded state endpoint. I don't know if that was documented, but that's what the code is showing. So just by having enabled polling, it will only do that for the collapse state. The idea being that, you know, if the data isn't ready or it's still polling or loading, that if you get a 200 okay, for the collapse summary state, you wouldn't, I guess the thinking was it would imply that the data is ready for the expanded state. So if we hit that second endpoint, it's fine. Because we don't have polling, for the secure stage, the way the bug manifests itself is the caching layer is endpoint specific. And I went with Tatiana over this. And the problem is that for, let's say, license compliance, you have license scanning reports and you have license scanning reports collapsed. The only difference is one, the keys in the object are the same. The only difference is that one returns the counts and the other one returns full arrays of data. And you hit the first endpoint, the collapsed one, that will pull, right? Assuming we fix the 204 problem, will pull until you get a 200 okay with data. You show it. Now you expand the widget. It's going to now hit the second endpoint, the full data endpoint. that endpoint has not been cached yet. It's going to be a cache miss because the way the caching layer works, it's endpoint specific. So, you know, there's a background service that runs to parse these reports. And because they're different, now it will error on the expanded state. So this is what you kind of get over here. Assuming that we fix the 204 problem, this would kind of happen. You would have eventually loading, and then you have the actual licenses. Cool. You expand it out, boom, you get this failure because that second endpoint doesn't have polling behavior as is right now in the MR widget extension. And if it, yeah, so that's what kind of this is. Now the workaround here, and I apologize, I'm going ultra fast as I have like a hard stop in like a few minutes, but the catch here is that we could work around this by not using the optimized endpoint, because if we use the same endpoint for collapse and pull data, by the time it's pulled and cached in the collapse state, when we expand it out, that request is already cached on the server, so we won't get this error. So, you know, that I would say that the second one isn't as much a blocker. It would be a blocker for using the optimization with polling. The first one, sorry, the first issue, I think, is a blocker for any of the security widgets, because, like I said, this bug will only really happen on during a new MR, during the pipeline run, or on a new MR with a completed pipeline run on the first page load until the cache expires. It seems to be a few hours. And there's some technical discussion I won't dive into now. I'll dive in tomorrow at the MR widget extension meeting about maybe some proposed things that I've tried, things to watch out for, and other widgets that might be impacted by this change that we need to go back and re-verify, don't break anything. The other thing is things like loading states. You know, we only cover, you know, loading and have data and error, but there's actually intermediary step. There's a loaded, but still waiting on data. And I go into kind of these intricacies and all that in these issues. But again, if you want, I know I went through this super quick, but tomorrow I will cover this in more detail and with the ability to answer questions. But the TLDR here is, if you're working on any of the security report widget extensions, so as part of the secure stage, you may want to consider introducing a widget specific feature flag. So we don't block the rollout of all the other widget extensions, because right now it's kind of, in my opinion, broken on certain edge cases. And they're tricky to catch because, you know, we're debugging, right? We keep refreshing the page in this MR. Very rarely do we go create a new MR, have the pipeline run, and have a fresh MR on every reload, right? So I think that's why we weren't catching it often. We thought everything was fine because we kept refreshing the page and data shows up, it renders cool, but this edge case comes up often. Actually, it manifested itself as let's see, it's come up a few times. Actually, super recently, there's a customer saying like, hey, license compliance is broken because of all these. Again, I won't go into detail here, but basically customers like, hey, I ran license compliance, but the widget isn't loading. It's just stuck on loading. And he expected it to be available as soon as he saw created the merge request, but it's not well documented that you need to wait for the pipeline to complete. And after it completes, there's a slight delay of parsing the reports. I think that's it. Sorry for the rush, but.
Yeah, thanks for the speed run, Fernando. That was great. I'm looking forward to the extended version tomorrow. And I don't want to steal any more of your time. If you need to leave,
sure.
See you soon.
Sure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you then.
Yeah,
Sweet. I do have a small point on the agenda that's kind of related, but that was mostly due to the fact or due to the condition about the current MR widgets and the state of them. So I just wanted to make sure how big the current problem on prod is, but that is already figured because it is not enabled yet. So we are not bugging any active users with these issues, and we have all the time in the world. And yeah, let's go fix this in the working group. And that would be the last part of our written agenda today. Arthur, is there any last minute items you want to bring to the table?
No, actually, not something that should be shared to the group. Well, basically, I'm just working on, together with the on improvements on dust scanner selection process. So basically, so far, it's very specific to that area.
Sweet. That sounds fantastic. Awesome. I'll stop the recording for now.
Sure.